At Living Out, we want to provide you as churches with the resources that you need to be biblically inclusive. And the latest thing we're wanting to, as it were, road test with you today is this audit that we can carry out as individuals, but preferably that we can carry out as church leadership teams on the church family we're part of. It's a road test, which is why biblically is misspelt, and that's slightly embarrassing. You can imagine how delighted I was with the elder at my church who pointed that out as we road tested this on Tuesday. I nearly wept, but I pulled myself together. What we will do is we will bring a sort of properly, nicely done version. We'll put it on the website in the next week or so that you can take and road test an actually grammatically accurate version. Let me just talk you through, though, the conversation I had with my elders on Tuesday morning using these questions. We just went through them and we thought about our church family and we sought to put by each of these statements true, false, not sure. And it was a really helpful exercise for us. How did the meeting go? Well, we started with question one, or statement one. Your church family meetings include people who could be labelled LGBTQI or are same-sex attracted. We thought, is that true of our church family? We've got the advantage that we've got a pastor who is same-sex attracted, so we felt quite smug for a few moments. But we also thought, are there other people in our church family? If there's nobody in your church family who hasn't been open, perhaps just even in private with you, you failed the first test. Encouragingly, though, what I find again and again in evangelical churches is that we do have people who are same-sex attracted. In fact, we have people who are same-sex attracted above the national average, which would be an encouragement to us. But if your church, there's nobody, failed the first test. Other tests, other things to think about. Is this true of your church? Derogatory language or stereotyping attitudes towards sexual minority groups would not be tolerated either up front or in conversation between church family members. We thought that was true of our church, but we all know, sadly, stories of churches where that is not true, where cheap shots are made, cheap jokes are made about people like me. But we did think a little bit about, do the activities we advertise often go along with contemporary gender stereotypes? Is it always the craft evenings for women, rugby and beer for the boys? Now, at one level, we know why we do that, but at another level, that can be the sort of unhelpful gender stereotyping that helps some people think in church think, I like craft and I'm a man, so I'm a real man, and vice versa. So we thought about that. 3, all in your church know that we all experience sexual brokenness and all are being encouraged to confess their own sexual sins. To be honest, we were unsure about this. We think that people know that we all experience sexual brokenness. We thought that people in our church were quite reluctant to talk about sexual brokenness. We're quite reluctant to talk about the way in which they are experiencing the effects of the fall in their sexuality. Although we've wonderfully had a young man who's up front talked about his addiction to pornography, which has been a massive step forwards. But we know that this is an area we need to work on. 4, same-sex sexual relationships are never mentioned in isolation from other sinful patterns of behaviour or from the forgiveness offered to all through faith in Christ crucified. For a moment we thought, we've passed this one. And then we thought to ourselves, actually, sometimes we use illustrations in sermons that basically say that the one thing that will give the impression that the one thing that is wrong in society at the moment is same-sex marriage. That's the one illustration, it's a default illustration of what's wrong with the world out there, which means we failed that test, and it was good to register that and to think of how we can correct it. All in your church, 5, are hearing the same call to radical self-sacrifice of themselves in response to God's giving of himself in Jesus. We've heard a lot on this already, haven't we? Is that true of your church? Or is it just same-sex attracted Christians who are being asked to give up things that really hurt? Everybody should be. Rosario Butterfield tells a story that when she became a Christian, her small talk over coffee was, what have you given up to become a follower of Jesus? Great question. There should be something. If there isn't something, questions need to be asked. 6, all in your church are encouraged to develop an identity founded first and foremost on their union with Christ. Is that true of your church? One of the things I have in my mind when I'm thinking about our weekly church family meetings is, are they boosting our church family's Christ esteem? I mean, one of the ways in which we sort of define what's happening. When somebody leaves our church family gathering, do they feel as if their union with Christ has been on the agenda? Do they feel more deeply rooted in him? That's what we should all be trying to do. A godly Christian sexual orientation would never prevent them from exercising their spiritual gifts or serving in leadership in your church. Is that true? Or does somebody being open about same-sex attraction put them in a category of, we would never, ever invest in leadership training with this person because of their problem? Sadly, that is often what's happened to people like me. Be open and honest about a struggle, just even an experience, and you're shunted to one side. That has not been biblically inclusive. God's gifts of either singleness or marriage are equally promoted, valued, and practically supported in your church's family life together. Is that true of your church family? I'm often provocatively asked ministers, if you have a marriage course, do you have a singleness course? Not because courses solve anything, but in some ways partly to make the point. The most encouraging thing that anybody's ever said to me about my church family, and I can say that because they're here, was, it's quite hard being a couple in this church. I was thrilled in a very ungodly way. 9, church family members instinctively share meals, homes, holidays, festival, money, children, with others from different backgrounds and life situations to them. We failed this on Tuesday morning because we thought to ourselves, yeah, there's a lot of sharing of those things, but to be honest, not with people from different backgrounds and life situations. That is something we need to work on. It's not particularly distinctive, it's not particularly countercultural if a group of people at exactly the same stage of life and with exactly the same experiences go on holiday together. Everybody does that. But when people look in and think, what are that lot doing on holiday with each other? That makes an impression. Finally, no one would be pressurized into expecting or seeking any healing or change that God has not promised any of us until the renewal of all things. Really important, I think, that we can write true to that one. That we actually, believe that yes, one day we'll be all made perfect like Jesus. But to promise people that we'll all be, if we do this bit of counseling, we do this course, we'll be made perfectly like Jesus in the here and now, and that is a sign of Christian maturity. To insist on that, deeply damaging to people. My lives were really helped by this. I was really helped by this. Just want to encourage you to take it home to your churches and use it. To give some time to going through it. To give some time to working out whether these statements are true, false, or just not sure. And then to think about how you can address these issues to become biblically inclusive churches. Commend that to you. The perfect version will be on the website soon.